shimmering vehicles surrounded her, yet not a single salesperson approached. When she finally showed interest in the premium model, the salesman in the crisp blue suit raised his hand dismissively. "I'm sorry," he said, loud enough for all to hear, "but you clearly don't have the money for this." Little did he know, her husband's black card was poised to transform the scene in this Chicago showroom. Morning sunlight poured through the windows of Diane Mitchell's spacious lakefront apartment in downtown Chicago. At 40, she exuded a quiet confidence that stemmed from a deep understanding of herself and her values. Her chestnut hair was neatly pulled back in a simple ponytail as she savored her coffee, gazing out at Lake Michigan. "Are you sure you don't want me to come with you?" James's voice resonated from the hallway. Her husband of 12 years emerged, adjusting his tie in preparation for another day at the investment firm he had built from the ground up. From the very beginning, Diane smiled, shaking her head. "I've got this. You know how I feel about these things." James chuckled. "I do indeed, that's why I married you." Their life together was a tapestry of contradictions that somehow wove together perfectly. James had amassed a fortune that placed them among Chicago's elite. Yet Diane remained unwaveringly devoted to her minimalist philosophy. She chose clothes for comfort, not for labels. Their home, while undeniably luxurious, was devoid of ostentation. To Diane, wealth was a responsibility, not a personality trait. Besides, she added, Diane was determined to take matters into her own hands. Her 10-year-old sedan had finally reached the end of its road, and after years of turning down James's suggestions to upgrade, she felt it was time for a change. It wasn't about seeking luxury. She had done her homework and discovered a model that matched her environmental values and practical requirements. "Just promise me one thing," James said, kissing her forehead. "Don't let anyone give you a hard time." Diane chuckled. "When have I ever?" After he left, she slipped into her favorite worn jeans and a cozy navy sweatshirt featuring Chicago written boldly across the front. She glanced at her reflection for a moment, skipping the makeup routine. At 40, her face reflected a life rich with experiences. Laugh lines framing her eyes and a natural radiance stemming from valuing well-being over superficiality. She tucked her wallet into her crossbody bag, ensuring James's black card was securely stowed away. Though she seldom relied on it, favoring her own modest credit card for everyday expenses, purchasing a car was a different matter. This would be a rare exception to her usual financial habits. As Diane stepped out the door, she was blissfully unaware that her typical Tuesday was on the brink of transformation. The Prestige Auto Gallery loomed ahead, a shining testament to opulence nestled in Chicago's Gold Coast. Its glass and polished metal exterior caught the morning sun, casting reflections that felt almost daunting. Diane arrived in her worn sedan, the stark difference between her car and the luxurious models showcased in the showroom windows strikingly apparent. She maneuvered her vehicle into a space between a sleek sports car and a businessman's ride. Luxury SUV straightened her sweatshirt and walked toward the entrance with purpose. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. A marble floor so polished it mirrored the crystal chandelier overhead, golden decorative panels adorning the walls, and of course, the cars. Each vehicle sat on a slightly raised platform, perfectly lit to accentuate every curve and feature. A red sports coupe, a golden luxury sedan, a sleek black SUV, each more beautiful than the last. A gentle piano concerto played in the background, and the air was scented with what Diane recognized as an expensive custom fragrance. Everything about the space was designed to whisper exclusivity. For salesmen in identical blue suits stood in various positions around the showroom. As Diane entered, she noticed the immediate shift in their body language. The slight stiffening, the exchanged glances, the hesitation. Not one of them moved to greet her. She wandered among the vehicles, running her finger lightly along the fender of a particularly striking red model. Still no one approached. As she wandered through the showroom, a couple entered behind her. The man clad in an expensive suit, the woman adorned in designer labels. Instantly, two salesmen rushed to assist them. Diane couldn't help but smile to herself. This wasn't the first time her appearance had prompted such assumptions, and she was certain it wouldn't be the last. Continuing her self-guided tour, she bent down to inspect the interior of a golden sedan that had piqued her interest. After nearly 15 minutes of exploration, a voice finally broke the silence. Diane straightened up to find a young salesman approaching her, not one of the senior staff, who were attending to the well-dressed couple, but clearly junior by comparison, just looking for now. Diane replied with a warm smile, "But I'm in the market for a new car." "I see," he said, his tone suggesting he didn't believe her. "Well, let me know if you have any questions. These models might be a bit premium for most budgets." "I'm particularly interested in this one," Diane said, indicating the golden sedan, the Crown Victoria Sovereign, right? The hybrid model with the enhanced safety package. The salesman blinked, clearly surprised by her. "Specific knowledge, yes, that's correct. You know your cars." "I do my research," Diane said simply. "Could you tell me about the warranty options?" As she asked informed, detailed questions, the young man's demeanor gradually shifted. He began to engage more genuinely, though still with an undertone of doubt. From the corner of her eye, Diane noticed one of the senior salesmen, tall with perfectly coiffed hair and a stance that radiated confidence, watching their interaction with narrowed eyes. It was only a matter of time, she knew, before her interaction with the junior salesman was bound to draw attention, whether it was welcomed or not. The Crown Victoria Sovereign accelerates from 0 to 60 in just 4.2 seconds, but what truly captivates me is the regenerative braking system, Diane remarked, leaning slightly to catch a glimpse of the vehicle's interior. "I read that it boasts the highest efficiency in its class." The junior salesman, who introduced himself as Kevin, nodded with growing admiration. "That's correct. The engineers completely overhauled the system for this model year, and the safety rating? 5 stars across the board. All categories correct." Diane continued recalling the details from her extensive research. "Yes, ma'am, top of its class in impact protection." Their conversation had evolved into a genuinely enthusiastic discussion about the car's features, with Kev gradually forgetting his initial skepticism. Diane knew her stuff, and it was becoming impossible to ignore. "Would you like to sit inside?" Kevin offered, moving to open the door for her. "I'd love to," Diane replied, genuinely excited as she settled into the driver's seat, her hands instinctively finding the perfect position on the leather-wrapped steering wheel. She couldn't help but admire the craftsmanship. The dashboard was an elegant blend of traditional luxury and cutting-edge technology. She adjusted the seat, noting how perfectly it supported her back. "The ergonomics are excellent," she commented. "Better than the German model I test drove last week." Kevin leaned in through the open door. The designer spent 2 years perfecting just the driver's seat alone. "It shows," Diane said, admiring the entertainment system. "Integrates with any smartphone platform. Absolutely, let me show you how it works." Kevin was mid-demonstration when a shadow fell across them. The senior salesman Diane had not noticed earlier was standing beside the car, his expression a practiced mask of professional courtesy that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Kevin, I believe the Andersons need assistance with their paperwork," he said smoothly. "I'll take over here." Kevin hesitated, clearly reluctant to abandon a potential sale, but nodded. "Of course, Mr. Blake." He turned to Diane. "It was a pleasure speaking with you." As Kevin walked away, the senior salesman Blake cast a quick, dismissive glance at Diane. His smile remained fixed, yet there was a calculating glint in his eyes. "I see you're interested in the Sovereign," he remarked, his tone hinting at surprise. "It's our flagship model, starting at $175,000. Diane nodded, unfazed by the price. "Yes, Kevin was just showing me the infotainment system. It's quite impressive." Blake leaned against the car door. "It certainly is. We have more accessible models on the lot as well. Perhaps something in a different price range would be more suitable." The implication was clear, and Diane had to suppress a smile. She'd experienced this kind of treatment before. "Actually," she said, stepping out of the car with deliberate grace, "I've done extensive research, and the Sovereign is exactly what I'm looking for. The combination of performance, safety features, and environmental considerations checks all my boxes. Blake's eyebrows raised slightly. Environmental considerations at this price point? Most of our clients are. Diane replied simply, more interested in horsepower than carbon footprint. Blake's gaze traveled over her casual attire as he said, well, if you're serious about the Sovereign, we should discuss financing options. These vehicles typically require substantial down payments and excellent credit scores. That won't be necessary, Diane said. If I decide to purchase, I'll be paying in full today. For the first time, Blake's composed expression faltered, genuine surprise flashing across his features. Before he recovered, I see. Well, that's unusual. Diane smiled. Is it? I would think a dealership of this caliber would encounter clients who prefer straightforward transactions. Blake's assessment of her shifted visibly, recalculating the situation. Two other salesmen had drifted closer, sensing something interesting unfolding. The air in the showroom seemed to thicken with attention. Perhaps we should discuss this in my office, Blake suggested, gesturing toward a glass-enclosed space at the rear of the showroom. I prefer to continue looking. At the vehicle, Diane first replied, I have a few more questions about the features. Blake's professional smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, what else would you like to know? The showroom's ambient music seemed to fade into the background as Blake's patience visibly thinned. Diane had spent the last 20 minutes asking increasingly technical questions about the Sovereign, from its engine specifications to the sourcing of its leather interior, and the warranty covering the hybrid battery system. For how long exactly? She asked. Fully aware of the answer from her extensive research, Blake responded, his tone becoming more terse. 2 additional customers had walked into the showroom, and she sensed he was weighing the commission he could be forfeiting by staying engaged in this dialogue. That's impressive, Diane acknowledged. I'd like to see the color options available. Is the interior customizable as well? Blake's polished demeanor faltered just a bit. Ms. Mitchell, Diane interjected. Diane Mitchell. M. Mitchell. He pressed on. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but perhaps we ought to be straightforward with one another. He lowered his voice, though not sufficiently to keep nearby staff from overhearing. This vehicle signifies a considerable investment. The monthly payments would surpass what most individuals allocate for their mortgage. Diane held his gaze firmly. I'm aware of the price point, Mr. Blake. As I mentioned earlier, I'm ready to make a purchase today if the car meets my expectations. Blake let out a small, incredulous laugh that failed to reach his eyes. With all due respect, Miss Mitchell, having been in the industry for 15 years, I can usually assess a serious buyer within moments. Your assessment indicates that Diane inquired, despite already knowing the answer. Blake's gaze fell on her casual outfit, the worn jeans, the simple sweatshirt, the practical crossbody bag. Let's just say I have reservations about whether this particular model suits your current circumstances. The mood in the showroom had changed. The other salesmen had ceased their pretense of indifference, and even a couple looking at a nearby vehicle had taken notice. As I turned to observe the unfolding scene, my current situation became clearer. Diane repeated her words, her voice steady, urging, Please enlighten me about my situation, Mr. Blake. There was something in her tone that might have alerted a more perceptive individual, but Blake, too convinced of his own assessment, leaned in slightly. His voice dropped to what he clearly believed was a considerate whisper. Look, I understand it's fun to dream, to sit in these cars and imagine. We get people like you in here all the time. People like me, Diane echoed. Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with aspirational visits. However, my responsibility is to concentrate on qualified buyers. Perhaps one of our entry-level models would be more suitable. I would like to move forward with the Sovereign. Diane interrupted calmly, mentioning the golden one with all the options we discussed. Blake straightened, his patience visibly fading, and the facade of polite professionalism slipped away, replaced by barely concealed condescension. Ms. Mitchell, he said, his voice rising, I don't believe you grasp what you're requesting. This vehicle costs more than some homes, And the insurance alone would be astronomical. Diane remained composed. I understand perfectly, Mr. Blake. I'd like to proceed with the purchase. It was at this moment that Blake made the fatal miscalculation that would come to define this interaction. With an audience of colleagues and customers now openly watching, he raised his hand in a dismissive stop gesture directly in front of Diane's face. I'm sorry, he announced, loud enough for everyone in the showroom to hear. But you clearly don't have the money for this. I won't waste any more of your time or mine. The silence that enveloped the room was palpable. Every gaze in the showroom locked onto the scene unfolding before them. The salesman, clad in matching blue suits, stood as a stark contrast to the few customers who had halted their conversations mid-sentence. Even the receptionist had momentarily ceased her typing, caught in the tension. Diane remained motionless, her face a mask of inscrutability as she processed the words and the dismissive gesture, rooted in mere appearance and assumption. I see, she finally spoke, her voice soft yet resonant in the hushed atmosphere of the showroom. That's quite an assessment based on very little. Mr. Blake crossed his arms, steadfast in his stance rather than reconsidering. It was rooted in 15 years of experience. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have clients waiting who are actually ready to make a purchase today. He began to turn away, clearly signaling the end of the discussion. One moment, Mr. Blake, Diane interjected, her voice sharp enough to make him pause. I believe I'm owed an explanation for why you think I don't have the money. I'm curious about the specific evidence that led you to this conclusion. In conclusion, the atmosphere in the showroom was thick with tension. Blake turned to Diane, irritation clear on his face. He hadn't anticipated her challenge, especially not in front of others. Look, he said, his tone barely masking his impatience. This isn't personal. It's just about qualifying buyers. We cater to a certain caliber of client. Diane met his gaze, her voice unwavering. And how do you define this caliber? Is there a dress code I overlooked on the website? A specific way one must speak? Or is it something else entirely? A flush crept up Blake's neck. Behind him, one of the other salesmen shifted uncomfortably, and the couple who had been browsing nearby exchanged glances. Miss Mitchell, it's simply common sense. The Sovereign is a vehicle for executives, entrepreneurs, successful professionals, people who have achieved a certain level of success. He gestured vaguely at her appearance. Your presentation suggests you might be more comfortable at one of our sister dealerships downtown. Diane absorbed the insult without flinching. At that moment, she resolved how to move forward. She could easily walk away and take her business elsewhere, or she could disclose her financial situation right then and observe him retreat. Yet, the sheer confidence with which he had dismissed her, coupled with the public humiliation he had tried to impose, warranted a more thoughtful reaction. Mr. Blake, she stated, her voice adopting a calm authority that caught the attention of several onlookers. I would like to speak with your manager. Blake's demeanor changed from irritation to, with a sense of smug satisfaction. She knew Mr. Reynolds would be eager to elaborate on their qualification process. He pivoted and strode toward the glass office at the rear of the showroom, seemingly convinced he was calling for backup rather than facing his own reckoning. Diane stayed rooted in place, acutely aware of the scrutiny surrounding her. The junior salesman, Kevin, cast her a sympathetic look from across the room, while the receptionist had picked up her phone, whispering urgently into it. In the stillness of that moment, Diane contemplated. She reflected on all those who had faced judgment based solely on their appearance, overlooked because they didn't conform to someone else's limited view of success or value. Her thoughts drifted to James, who, despite his affluence, held dear the belief that a person's character was far more significant than their external adornments. Blake stepped out of the office, accompanied by an older gentleman in a charcoal suit, likely Mr. Reynolds, the manager. His demeanor was meticulously neutral as he approached Miss Mitchell, stating, I understand there's been some confusion. Reynolds initiated the conversation with a conciliatory tone, yet there was an undercurrent of dismissiveness that mirrored Blake's demeanor. Mr. Blake is one of our most seasoned sales associates. and he's merely striving to guarantee that all our clients are appropriately paired with vehicles that align with their needs and capabilities. Yes, he made those capabilities quite clear, Diane interjected. He openly stated in front of your entire showroom that I lack the funds for the vehicle I'm interested in purchasing. Reynolds maintained his fixed smile. I'm certain there was a misunderstanding. We take pride. At Prestige Auto Gallery, we pride ourselves on customer service. And there was no misunderstanding. Diane stated firmly that Mr. Blake based his assessment solely on her appearance, not on any financial information. She found that approach both unprofessional and disappointing. Reynolds exchanged a quick glance with Blake, perhaps sensing they had gotten off on the wrong foot. Why don't we start fresh? What vehicle were you interested in? He asked. I was interested in the Crown Victoria Sovereign, Diane replied, emphasizing the past tense. But now I'm not certain this is the establishment I want to do business with. The change in Reynolds' demeanor was subtle yet immediate. The thought of losing a high-value sale clearly weighed on him more than Blake's behavior. I assure you, Miss Mitchell, that Mr. Blake's approach doesn't reflect our company values. If you're seriously considering the Sovereign, we would be delighted to assist you. I was serious, Diane interrupted. Mr. Blake wasn't, was he? She reached for her crossbody bag, opening it deliberately. The hush of tension in the showroom was broken only by the soft classical music still playing overhead. Reynolds and Blake observed with barely hidden doubt as Diane rummaged through her bag, their faces hinting at the anticipation of her revealing an inconsequential document or a simple bank statement that would merely reinforce their beliefs. Instead, she pulled out a sleek black wallet, its leather pristine and untouched by the rigors of everyday life. With measured care, she opened it, extracting a single card that immediately drew their focus. The unmistakable black titanium of an invitation-only credit card. The card was designated for clients whose affluence placed them among the elite. Perhaps this will shed light on my circumstances for you, Mr. Blake, Diane stated with composure as she extended the card. Blake gazed at it, his face shifting swiftly from disbelief to shock, culminating in the chilling awareness of its implications. The black card shimmered beneath the showroom lights, its significance as commanding as a royal decree from medieval times. That's... Blake started, but the words eluded him. Yes, Diane affirmed. It is. Reynolds stepped in promptly, maintaining a level of professionalism. He recognized the catastrophic error unfolding before him. Miss Mitchell, please accept our most sincere apologies for this misunderstanding. The onyx black card is, of course, more than sufficient for any purchase in our establishment. It's not a misunderstanding, Diane corrected him gently but firmly. Mr. Blake made a deliberate judgment based on my appearance. He decided, without any financial information whatsoever, that I didn't belong here. She turned her attention back to Blake, who had paled visibly. The card belongs to my husband, James Mitchell. Perhaps you're familiar with Mitchell Global Investments? The mere mention of the name sent a jolt through the room. Reynolds' eyes widened, and a small gasp escaped from the receptionist's desk. James Mitchell was indeed a figure of renown in Chicago's business landscape, a billionaire whose investment firm oversaw portfolios for some of the wealthiest families in the Midwest and beyond. Miss Mitchell, I had no idea, Blake began, his voice strained. That was precisely the issue, Diane interjected. You had no idea who I was, yet you felt comfortable publicly, humiliating me based on my clothing. You determined my value as a customer and perhaps as an individual solely by my appearance. Blake's face shifted from pale to red as the full implications of his mistake dawned on him. Not only had he insulted a woman capable of purchasing every car in the showroom, but he had also done so to the wife of one of Chicago's most influential businessmen. I can't begin to express how deeply sorry I am, he stammered, acknowledging it was a terrible misjudgment on his part. Reynolds stepped forward, clearly trying to mitigate the damage. Control, Miss Mitchell. We sincerely wish to rectify this situation. It would be our privilege to assist you with your purchase, and we can certainly extend an exclusive discount as a gesture of goodwill. A discount? Diane repeated, her tone contemplative, as if she had just realized the implications of the offer. Reynolds hesitated, aware of the inconsistency in his words. I merely intended to convey my understanding, he stammered. But Diane interjected, I want to clarify something. My concern isn't about Mr. Blake's awareness of my financial situation. It's about his perception. Entitled to make assumptions and to treat another human being with contempt based on those assumptions. She glanced around the showroom, noting that every person present was listening intently. The junior salesman, Kevin, was watching with something like admiration in his eyes. The truth is, Diane continued, turning the black card over in her fingers, I rarely use this card. I don't typically define myself by my husband's success or our financial status. I choose to dress comfortably. I choose to drive practical vehicles. I choose to value. Individuals should be judged by their character rather than their looks or material belongings. She purposefully returned the card to her wallet and fixed her gaze on Blake. The question isn't whether I can afford your car, Mr. Blake. It's whether you deserve my business. The silence that ensued was profound, with even the background music fading into silence, as if the sound system itself was pausing in anticipation. Blake stood frozen, his previous confidence crumbled, while Reynolds shifted into damage control mode. Ms. Mitchell, he began. The manager began, his voice a study in controlled panic. I cannot apologize enough for this unfortunate incident. Mr. Blake's conduct does not reflect our values, and I assure you that appropriate measures will be taken. Blake finally found his voice, though it emerged strained and unnaturally high. Miss Mitchell, please. I made a terrible mistake. If you'll allow me to make it right. How exactly would you make it right? Diane asked, her tone genuinely curious rather than accusatory. Would you treat the next person who walks in, wearing casual clothes with more respect? Or would you simply be more careful about who you judge openly? Blake had no answer for this, his mouth opening and closing without producing sound. Reynolds stepped in smoothly. Miss Mitchell, if you'll step into my office, I'd like to personally handle your purchase. We'll ensure you receive our VIP treatment, and I'll see to it that Mr. Blake is actually... Diane interrupted. I'd prefer to continue our conversation here. She gestured around the showroom. After all, my humiliation wasn't private. Why should this be? By this point, a small crowd had gathered. Other salespeople, customers who had entered during the confrontation, and even two detailers who had emerged from the service area, all drawn by the palpable tension. Reynolds, visibly uncomfortable with the public nature of the situation, conceded but saw no alternative. From the corner of her eye, Diane noticed Kevin, the junior salesman who had initially assisted her, stepping forward hesitantly. Mitchell, he said, his voice steady despite the obvious risk he was taking. If you're still interested in the sovereign, I would be honored to assist you. I believe the golden model we discussed would suit you perfectly. Diane recognized the significance of the gesture. This young man was not just extending professional courtesy, but also making a public statement by aligning himself with her instead of his colleagues. Blake shot Kevin a venomous look, but Reynolds quickly nodded, eager to seize any chance to salvage the situation. An excellent suggestion. Kevin is one of our most knowledgeable associates. Diane paused to consider for a moment. Then she shook her head gently. I appreciate the offer, Kevin, truly. You were respectful and helpful from the beginning, but I think my husband and I will take our business elsewhere. She turned back to Blake, who seemed to physically shrink under her gaze. Mr. Blake, I want you to understand something. Today wasn't about a car. It wasn't even about money. It was about basic human dignity and respect. Blake nodded miserably, unable to meet her eyes. I hope, Diane continued, that the next time someone walks into this showroom, regardless of what they're wearing, they speak or what assumptions you might make about their financial status, you'll remember this moment. A murmur of approval rippled through the onlookers. Reynolds, sensing that the situation had spiraled completely beyond his control, made one last desperate attempt. Mitchell, please reconsider. Your husband has been a valued client of Prestige Auto Gallery in the past, and we would be devastated to lose your family's business. Diane raised an eyebrow. Has he? That's interesting since James has purchased all his vehicles from Lakeside. For the past decade, motors had been a source of contention. Reynolds found himself ensnared in a blatant falsehood. I must have been mistaken, he conceded. Yes, Diane replied. You were mistaken about many things. With a poised demeanor, she straightened her shoulders and adjusted her crossbody bag. Addressing the entire showroom, she said, Thank you all for this enlightening experience. I wish you well. As she turned to leave, Kevin stepped forward once more. Miss Mitchell, for what it's worth, I think you handled this with incredible grace. I would have lost my temper much sooner. Diane smiled genuinely at the young man. Thank you. Kevin, hold on to this feeling for when you find yourself in Mr. Blake's shoes one day. Treat everyone as if they truly matter, because they do. With that, she strode toward the exit, her head held high, leaving behind a showroom filled with astonished faces and a crucial lesson about the perils of judging others by their looks. The glass doors of Prestige Auto Gallery whispered shut behind Diane as she approached her aging sedan, catching sight of the frantic activity through the showroom windows, with Reynolds gesturing animatedly at Blake. Kevin was pulled aside by another manager, while staff huddled in small groups, clearly discussing what had just transpired. Diane sat in her car for a moment, taking a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly, not from anger but from the adrenaline of confrontation. Despite her composed exterior, standing up for herself had taken emotional energy. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. How did the car shopping go? She smiled, typing back, Enlightening. We'll tell you everything tonight. As she started the engine, she noticed Reynolds. Hurrying across the parking lot toward her car, she rolled down the window as he approached. Miss Mitchell, he said, slightly out of breath. Please, I implore you to reconsider. Mr. Blake has been suspended pending review, and I've spoken personally with our regional director, who would like to offer you our most sincere apologies. Diane looked at him thoughtfully. Mr. Reynolds, I appreciate that you're trying to mitigate the damage, but I think we both know this isn't just about one salesman's behavior. I assure you, Miss Mitchell Blake's actions were an anomaly, weren't they? Diane interrupted gently, recalling how, when I first walked in, not a single salesperson approached me for nearly 15 minutes, while better-dressed customers received immediate attention. This suggests a culture, not just an individual. Reynolds had no response to this observation, his professional smile faltering at times. Diane continued, A mistake like this can be an opportunity for genuine reflection and change. I hope that's what happens here. With that, she rolled up her window and drove away, leaving. Reynolds stood in the parking lot, his face reflecting a blend of concern and understanding as Diane maneuvered through the bustling midday traffic of Chicago. Suddenly, the car's speaker system came alive with a ring, and the caller ID flashed Lakeside Motors. Hello, Miss Mitchell, greeted a warm female voice when Diane picked up. This is Sarah Jenkins from Lakeside Motors. Your husband mentioned you might be car shopping today, and I wanted to reach out to see if we could assist you. A smile crossed Diane's face at the perfect timing. Actually, Sarah, I am in the market for a new. I recently had an intriguing experience at a competitor's establishment. Sarah's tone was professionally curious, yet not intrusive. It was clear they made certain assumptions based on my casual attire. I expressed my desire for a dealership that treats everyone with respect, regardless of their appearance. M. Mitchell at Lakeside Motors assured me that everyone deserves equal service and respect. Without missing a beat, Sarah acknowledged my husband's long-standing relationship with the dealership, but emphasized that even if I were a complete stranger, I would receive the same level of care. The approach remains consistent, and it's nice to hear. Diane expressed her interest in the Crown Victoria Sovereign, ideally in gold. Are there any available on the lot? We have 2 models ready for viewing, Sarah confirmed. Would you like to set up an appointment to see them? Yes, thank you. How about tomorrow morning? Perfect. And Miss Mitchell, please feel free to dress in whatever makes you comfortable. Our goal is to assist you in finding the right car, not to judge your wardrobe choices. After ending the call, Diane couldn't help but smile. There were still companies that recognized the essential value of treating individuals with respect, while at Prestige Auto Gallery, the repercussions of Blake's error were just starting to emerge. By the time Diane returned home that evening, the regional director had taken it upon himself to reach out and express his apologies, having been alerted to the situation by a frantic Reynolds. What remained unknown to them was that one of the customers who had observed the whole interaction was a lifestyle blogger with a significant following among Chicago's elite. Grieving the narrative of how Prestige Auto Gallery had shamed the spouse of billionaire James Mitchell would spread across social media and the elite social circles of the city. For Blake, the repercussions would be especially harsh. His suspension would evolve into a permanent termination once background checks uncovered that this was not his initial encounter with discriminatory behavior towards clients. His standing in the luxury automotive sales community would suffer irreversible harm. As for Kevin, however, the day signified. An unexpected turning point emerged when his readiness to advocate for what was just, despite potential professional repercussions, drew the attention of Lakeside Motors management. They extended an offer that came with significantly improved terms compared to his role at Prestige. The far-reaching consequence for Prestige Auto Gallery was the necessity to introduce extensive training on unconscious bias and equitable customer service practices. This change would ultimately benefit numerous customers, like Diane, who deserved to be treated with respect. 1 week later, Diane pulled into the driveway of her and James's lakefront home in a gleaming Golden Crown Victoria Sovereign. The purchase experience at Lakeside Motors had been everything Prestige Auto Gallery wasn't. Respectful, focused on her needs rather than her appearance, and genuinely pleasant. As she stepped out of the car, James emerged from the front door, a broad smile lighting up his face. "It's beautiful," he said, admiring the vehicle. "But not nearly as beautiful as its owner." Diane laughed, accepting his kiss, a smooth talker indeed. "But thank you for the card that day. It made quite an impression." "From what you've told me, you made quite an impression all on your own," James replied. "Sarah Jenkin called to thank me for referring you. She said you were one of the most knowledgeable customers she's ever worked with." They walked toward the house together, arms linked. "You know," James said thoughtfully, "the story's gotten around. I've had 3 different clients mention it in meetings this week." Diane sighed. "I wasn't trying to cause a scene or damage anything. Their business, I understand that, but sometimes these situations are necessary." He squeezed her hand. "Reynolds called me yesterday." "Did he?" The man raised an eyebrow.